All right, welcome to another PLD session, and in today's session we are going to be discussing web server and SSH, and basically our focus is on how to practicalize these concepts and using them to solve various questions that we come across, or even in our lives as software engineers, being able to use these concepts practically. So that's going to be the focus. And to get everything started, as I always do, I always want to start from the very basis, build up on something that you already know. Then we gradually get into the parts that you don't know, so that at least you're able to make those connections. So that's what I'm going to be doing here as well. And with that said, the first thing we want to look at is when we say a server, what is a server? Where's my pen? Pen, where are you? Pen. Oh. Wow. Where's my pen? Sorry, excuse me, I think my pen is not showing. I don't know why. Okay, good. My pen is back now. So let's start with this. What is a server? I feel that a number of us get scared when we hear the word server. Like, we start imagining things. But basically, when you say a server is like just a computer. Okay? So everything that you can do with your computer right now, you can do with the server. See it from that angle. When we say a server, it's just a computer. So basically, like, the term would refer to either a physical or virtual computer, okay, that performs some services. Simple. Like, it is that simple. See it as a computer when we say a server. How do you get access to your computer? If I gave you my computer right now and it was switched off and you were to switch it on, there is a password to my computer that you will need to enter before you get access to it, right? I believe almost everyone here has some sort of a password to their computer or their phones, whether a pattern, a pin, whatever you are using. There's some form of authentication that needs to take place before someone is able to access the content in your computer. So what happens with servers is that basically they are also computers, and for you to get access to the content of the server or anything on that computer, so now you just see a server as what? A remote computer, because the servers we are going to work on right now are not here with us. In fact, you can convert your own computer into the server that we are going to work, but then we know the various tasks that we are working on, and the server that we have been given to work on are not for us. So I'm just going to refer to that as a remote computer. So I could choose any of you here right now and use your computer as a server, where I'm going to try and access your computer from my end. So it's a remote server and I need to access it. But to access it, there is supposed to be some form of connection, right? There's supposed to be some form of linkage between my machine and your machine. If there is nothing like that, there is no way I'm going to be able to access it. So there has to be that kind of, let me call it a protocol that will enable my computer to communicate with your computer. So we have two computers that needs to communicate with each other. Say this computer belongs to me, so this is Obed's computer, and this belongs to David. Okay, so we have two computers, and we need the computers to communicate with each other. There has to be a way that this computer can communicate with that one. And we have various protocols through which that connection can be created or established. There are various protocols through which that connection can be established. One of the very simple ones, or not simple, but the right word is common. The very common ones that you come across is what we use to access the internet, which is either HTTP or HTTPS. what you always have to remember is that anytime you are trying to access a particular website, that website is just a page. I mean, you are software engineers, you understand. It's just a script that has been written and put on a server somewhere. So you are trying to access that server on somebody else's computer. I mean, the server is somewhere else. So you are trying to access it and download or use the files that are on here. Okay, so I can establish a connection through the internet using either HTTP or HTTPS, and I'll be able to see the script that David has on his computers. And that's basically what happens. But then for the purpose of today's session, we are looking at a protocol called SSH, which simply represents, or it's an abbreviation for secured shell. Okay, so this is one of the protocols that will enable us to communicate with a remote device. However, this is very secured, very secured, and mostly when you are working with servers, it is like the very common protocol that you are going to be working with. That is why it is important for us to know about it and learn about it. Okay, so then for us to have access to the remote computer, I said earlier that almost every one of us has some form of password on our server. So whoever created the server will put a password on it, and you need to enter that password to have access to it. However, when you are using SSH as your your protocol, let me keep things simple. Whenever you are using SSH as your protocol, there is another way that you can authenticate without necessarily having to keep a password. Okay, so we are looking at how you get access to the computer itself. I mean, we've established the connection between your computer. So I have connected Obert's computer to David's computer, but David has a password on his computer. So I need to authenticate. The password, the David's computer needs to recognize me as an authorized user before I can have access to what is in it. If it is that open, it means that anybody in the world can have access to the content, which is bad. We don't need them to have access to these critical things. Okay, so later when we start learning, in fact, we've already done some parts where we've learned about web servers, we've learned about application servers, we've learned about database servers. Not to confuse you, but then what you do is you usually put some in the front that anybody in the world, like if it is a website, you want anybody in the world to be able to have access to. But then your database files or your application files, you don't want anyone else to have access to except the people in your organization with the right authority to have access to it. So by doing that, you are going to put some form of a barrier to entry into that system or the back end of your system. You don't want them to have access to certain things. So by using SSH, the means of authentication, there is one simple means of authentication, and that is known as using the SSH key pairs. And basically what the key pairs represents, you can look at it from this angle. They are just a padlock and a key. Let's see it as such. A padlock and a key. So you are coming to enter my room. Let's say it is our office. Our computer is our office. And anybody else can come in. But then we have given certain keys. The padlocks are there. And we have given keys to the workers who are authorized to come into that office. So anytime a worker comes, puts their key inside, they are able to open it. Anybody else who comes who doesn't have the key that matches the padlock that is on our gate will not be able to enter. So that is basically what the SSH key pairs are. But technically, the key pairs are what we refer to as a private key and a public key. So just like the padlock and the key, you think of the private key as the padlock, and the public key as the key. Or maybe it should be the other way around. But I mean, just grab the concept from this angle. We have a private key and we have a public key. Anytime that you are trying to access the computer, that server you are trying to access, the server has the private key, the public key on it. Sorry. The server has your private key, your public key. Let me not make this mistake. Please, let me back up and do this again. This is my computer, and I established a connection with a remote computer, right? That belongs to David. This David's computer has public keys, a list of public keys. So if you come with a private key, so each computer trying to access it will come with a private key. So it's going to check, does this private key match this public key? So that's why I was saying that I think I made a mistake there. Let's consider the private key as your key, while the public key is the padlock. Okay? So this is what happens. Anytime you are trying to access the remote server using SSH, the key is presented to the padlock. And if your key cannot open this padlock, then we are not going to give you access to this server. So we are going to deny you permission. So permission denied. And I believe some of you might have seen this somewhere. Permission denied. When you get a permission denied error, all it means is that your private key does not match the public key. There is some form of handshake that goes on, that they are supposed to match perfectly. If there is any mismatch between the private key and the public key, then it's not going to allow you. So that's why I use the key and the padlock, because if your key does not fit the padlock, you can't even enter it, and it's not going to open, even if it looks like it, but it is not the right key. Okay, so your private key may look like what this public key is expecting, but so far as it is not what it has been authorized to allow, it's not going to allow you access. I hope that makes sense. So basically, that is what SSH is and how we use SSH to access a remote server. And I've said a remote server is basically a computer. You need to have access to a computer. You need to enter some password, okay? But this time around with SSH, we can forgo entering password. It is very important because if you make a mistake and somebody outside the organization has access to your password or is able to hack the password that you use, they can cause damage to your service. So you want to limit the possibility of people outside the organization having access to your server. That is one reason why we begin to adopt SSH as the protocol for communication between our servers. So you go to most software organizations, tech organizations, you find out that the major means of communication between the servers or computers is through SSH. And with SSH, if your computer has not been configured to have access to the server, you will not be able to have access to it. So always you need an admin of the server to put your public key on that particular server before you can access it with your computer. So if you are brought on as a software engineer right now into company ABC, and the system administrators, they haven't added your public key, that is your SSH public key, to any of the servers, the authorized keys in any of the servers, it means you are not going to have access to any of their systems. And that is how we do to protect people from outside the organization from having access to it. But in that same vein, there is a downside to it where you've connected your computer automatically to the server. So if you make a mistake and a hacker gets access to your computer, they are able to use your computer to access your company's servers. So very important. And therefore, when you go into organizations like that, there is serious regulations concerning SSH keys, authentications, and things, and even there are what we call what is the term? Forgotten the term, but then you rotate the keys with time. So there's, I think it is called password lifecycle management or something like that. The keys lifecycle management, something like that. So there are policies that govern how often you should change your key. I mean, how often you should generate new key, when and how to block a key that is existing on the server, and all of that. Okay. The only reason why we are doing that is we are trying to prevent outside intrusions into our service. I hope that makes sense. Now we can move on. You understand what SSH is? Basically, it's a means for us to be able to connect to a remote computer securely. And how are we able to connect to them? We do that through the use of the SSH key pairs. What are these SSH key pairs? We have the private key and the public key. The public key, if you want to be able to access a remote computer, your public key is kept on that remote computer so that it can easily recognize that private key that it is associated with. So there is always a match when you try to pair with that remote computer and it gives you access. If there is a mismatch in any way, there is no way it's going to allow you access. So basically that is how the SSH key pairs work. The next thing we want to look at is how then do we generate these key pairs, which I believe almost everyone here might have done by now. How to generate the SSH key pairs? It's simple. There is a utility available we are using Ubuntu. I believe everyone here is using Ubuntu. If you are using Sandbox, you are ALX. If you are using the Sandbox, I believe you are using you are using Ubuntu. And if you are using any other virtual machine too, I believe now you are using Ubuntu. So I can go ahead and say Ubuntu is what we are using. So with Ubuntu, there is a utility or a tool that is available, and it's called SSH Keygen. And anytime you run SSH Keygen, it is going to generate a private key and a public key. So both keys will be generated for you. Okay. So for you to be able to have access to a remote device or a remote server, you need the administrator of that server to put your public key on that server. That's how it works. For as long as your public key is not on the remote server, you can't have access to it. Okay? And the good thing is you can have as many public keys, as many private keys as you want. And there is a way to configure them, which we'll look at soon. But then to be able to have access to the remote server, you need your public key to have access to this. So there is no magic in where you create a server and you are able to connect to it or you are not able to connect to it. So what we have done, please bear with me for copyright's sake, bear with me here. What we have done is that when we create the private key and the public key, we copied our public key. Okay, and what did we do with the public key? We gave it to someone who has the authority to put it on our server. Then you go and say, hey, give me the IP address of that server that you have put this thing on. So they now give you access. So in simple terms, this is what has happened. This is your computer. You've generated your key pairs, your private key and your public key. Okay. You've generated them and you copied your public key and you gave it to the administrator of a server. That administrator put your public key there and returned the server IP address to you, saying that your IP address is 100.25.69.3. So now you are able to access this server using your private key because your public key is there already. So if you submitted a public key, okay, and you have come to generate another public key, and the old public key doesn't exist any longer, you no longer have access to this device, this server. I hope it's making sense. I may have to be direct in a way, but then I'm trying to avoid talking specifics. So bear with me. What I am saying is that if you already requested for this remote server, okay, and that remote server has been, any remote server that you requested has been configured with a public key that you provided initially. So if that public key doesn't exist again, then you are at a loss because you can no longer access that server. To be able to access it, you now have to generate a new set of keys and send your public key for it to be used to configure a new server for you. And that means that you have to kill the old server that you had because you no longer have access to that. So the challenge here is that if you are the only person that has that server and you are the only person that has access to it, and you end up destroying that your private key, I mean that key that you used to connect initially, if you end up destroying it, then now no one else will have access to it. Assuming you have disabled any other form of authentication, which we are going to look at right now, how to configure those ones. Okay, but I hope this makes sense. If you create a server, so in order to come here, I think last 2 days I was trying to test this. I went to set up a virtual server on AWS to test it. And what I realized was that as soon as you launch the virtual server, AWS is configured such that it keeps your public key on the server. Okay, so this is what it means. So if right now you need to have access to that public server, that server, virtual server that I've created in AWS, you have to upload your public key to me. Okay, so send me your public key. If you send me your public key, I'm going to go into that server because when I created it, they put my public key there. So I'm going to go into it and I'm going to add your public key. And now you can access that virtual server that I have. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Any questions up to this point? I wish I could be very direct and explain this. Any questions so far about using the SSH to access the public key and the private key to access a server? Yes. I thought someone unmuted. Okay, then let's go on.
Okay.
Yeah, hi.
The last.
Ernest, I'm struggling to hear you. Hi, Ernest.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm just pleading that you just
yes,
come up
I can
with
hear
the
you.
last
Go
explanation.
ahead.
That is what I just missed.
Okay. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that the server that you are working with doesn't belong to you, right? You are not the one. I mean, that computer, I said a server is a computer. That computer doesn't belong to you. You were not there when the computer was created. But then the computer is created such that whenever it is created and they put a public key in it, any other machine that has the associated private key will be able to access this server. So anytime that we go ahead to request for a new server, the new server in our case is specifically configured with the public key that we have submitted already. And you and I know where to submit your public key. So in your profile, you submit your public key, and that public key is used to configure the server that you request. So if you request a server, then you go ahead and delete the associated key from your computer. Now you no longer have access to it because you've deleted that key. It's like, hey, I gave you a padlock, like I set up a padlock in my door for you to have access to it. I gave you the key, and now you've misplaced the key. How are you going to enter my room? You'll not be able to enter. So the next thing we'll have to do is we'll destroy this door. Then we have to now request for a new door. But before you request for the new door, make sure you've made available the padlock you want us to put there. That is your public key. You've made available your public key so that when we are building the new door or the new server in this case, we are going to configure the new server with your public key. And this public key is also associated with a private key that will be on your system. So anytime you are trying to log into this server, we are just two things. We are just trying to compare this with that. Do they match? If they match, we give you access. If they don't match, permission denied. Is that okay? So that is basically what is happening. If your private key matches the public key that was used to configure the server, you are going to be allowed inside. If not, you are going to be denied. Then something just came to me. For those of you who get to see connection refused mostly will occur when with our systems right now, if your server is not up and running, the connection is not going to go through. So if you don't get a connection refused error, then it means that your server is up and running and you are trying to reach it. So now it's now behoves on your public key and your private key handshake. If there is a match, then they will allow you access. So anytime you are getting a connection refused error, try and check if your server is still running. Sometimes your server is in a pending state. It's not running yet, and you are trying to connect to it. That will be a problem. If not with the current, the Ubuntu sandboxes that we have available to us, maybe some people may face it. I'm yet to come across it. But then connection refuse too can happen if your system is not configured. The system you are using, the computer you are using, is not configured for SSH connection, or it's not well configured for SSH connection. So there is a utility called OpenSSH, which sometimes you may have to install. I think by default it comes on some systems. Okay, but I feel that we don't need any of this, but I needed to mention this because I've seen a number of people complain about it. Connection refused. Sometimes you just have to try again because your system wasn't up and running or active at the time that you were trying to establish the connection. Once you've gone past connection refused and you're getting permission denied, it means that there's a mismatch between your private key and the public key. So you have to go and check that out. Probably when you are copying, if you copy an empty space and it's added onto what you saved in your profile, that is a problem. So you have to make sure that you are able to copy the exact public key that is on your computer. Copy it to the server or wherever that you are going to keep it. But then, where on the server is it stored? Okay, so no, before I go there, let me mention this one. With your computer right now, I said you can log in with a password. In the same way, almost any server can be configured to allow people to log in using password. But then we've decided that we are going to use SSH. So in the same way, you can also, if you are using a Linux-based system, you can also decide that, hey, from now onwards, nobody should enter my computer using a password. So if you have access to my password, you shouldn't be able to log in. So I'm going to disable password authentication. So you can do that and say that from now onwards, we are only going to access this using SSH. So if you ever, I don't know how to say it, but then when you see pictures of servers like in movies and things, you see servers are these big machines and they don't have any monitor or screen attached to them. They are just the server, the system unit that is there, and you are able to access it. How do you access it? So you connect remotely through SSH to them, and you authenticate through your SSH key pairs that we have discussed. Okay, then almost any root user also has the ability to access it using their credentials. So sometimes when you want to ensure maximum security, when you create a server, you go ahead and disable password authentication. Then you also disable remote user access. So you disable remote user access. By doing this, it means even if somebody is able to get access to the remote user's credentials, they will still not be able to utilize the server or access the server. And if somebody gets access to an employee's password, they will still not be able to have access to our server because we have disabled each of these. And the only one that we have allowed is the SSH key pairs. So we're tasked along the line to do something like that, to disable the password authentication in particular. This wasn't included. But then how do you go about it? You go to the SSH config file, okay? And the SSH config file is usually located at etc/ssh/ssh_config. So let me open my terminal and let's try that to see. Oh, what is this? Okay, where is my terminal? If you have any questions, you can just go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, Doc.
Yeah.
So when you're configuring a particular server with public key, is there a is there a maximum amount of public keys a particular server can take?
No. It's not something that I know of, but then I don't think there will be a maximum to it. Once you give access to it, it's like, hey, if you want to give your password to 10,000 people, who cares? Like anybody can have access to it. But then the other thing would be the demand on the server. How many people are concurrently working on the server? But then I don't think there is a limit to the number of public keys that you can put on your system. Okay.
So since we don't have access to this server, does it mean the people that the admin of those servers, they already deactivated the password and the remote access?
Not necessarily deactivated the password, but they've not given you a password. So if you don't have the password, how do you access it? So now, when you are able to connect via SSH and you log in, you can check, do they allow password or have they disabled password authentication? If they have disabled it, then fine. If they are not, you only need a password to be able to also access it. Okay, but
yes,
then actually, connection.
I've not had access to my server yet.
Okay,
so when I log in, I'll check.
Sure.
Okay, from there I can disable and enable it. Yes, it's true.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead. This is the configuration. I'm just displaying the content for us to see. So this is the content right now. That's for my own, I say a server is a computer. So for my own computer right now, this is even my virtual machine. For my virtual machine, this is the SSH configuration that we have. And you see, I have password authentication, that is yes. So I can do it such that when you are logging in using SSH, it should request a password. We can do that as well. Remember, SSH is just the protocol that we are using to connect the computer. But the easiest way to authenticate is through the key pairs. But we can also do it such that you need to use a password to log in. Let me just say this before you ask the question. I'm coming. So if you are trying to access intranet, sandbox from the intranet, what do? You grab the SSH link. If you pay attention to it right now, you would understand it. Maybe those times you were doing it, you didn't understand it. But then if you want to connect to the sandbox, you copy your SSH link and you paste it. And when you paste it, it asks you for what? A password. And you go and copy the password and come and paste that password before it allows you access. So in that case, you are connecting using SSH, but then you are not using a key pair to connect. Rather, you are using a password to connect. And that password has been provided for each and every one of us to be able to access the sandbox, which is also a server, to access it through using that password. If now you get access to it and you decide to go and disable password authentication when you don't have the key pair, it means that you've locked yourself out of your own sandbox. Does that make sense? So now, sorry, Stephen, you can go ahead and ask the question.
So I was missing the link. So the link I was missing is because there must be an access point for you to have access to it. But now I get it. When you request for the server, they automatically put the key pairs in your server.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of us, a lot of people didn't appreciate. Okay, that's why I wish I could be straight with all of these things and just say it as they are. So if you don't have a public key available in your profile, it means that a server that is launched for you doesn't have a public key. I mean, it doesn't have a public key that belongs to you. Okay, so if you want to be able to use your key pair to connect to that server that will be given to you, you need to make sure that your public key is already in your profile. Then you request for a server. So it has been configured such that anytime you are requesting for a server, the server, or that it's not a human being, it has been automated. So the automation has it such that the process will go into your profile and go and look for a public key. Then now put that public key in the right place on the server so that you can authenticate using the key pair. So that is what happens behind the scenes. So if you created an earlier, I mean, it happened with someone we're trying to configure for, and it happens such that they use one, let's say you use Sandbox when you were doing the previous task to generate your SSH key pair, then you uploaded it. And this time around, you are using your virtual machine to try and access the server that you've been given. Hey, you don't have access. This virtual machine doesn't have that private key that will match with the public key that was used to generate your server. I hope it makes sense. So you have to make sure that if this is the machine you are using to connect. So right now, if I configure my virtual machine to have multiple machines, like multiple Ubuntu instances installed on it, I can't say because I have it installed on instance A and I have connected instance A to my server, I cannot jump to instance B and try and access the server. It's not possible. Each computer is different. Each virtual machine is different. Like they have their key pairs in them. The private key is stored in it. So you can only access it if that machine you are trying to use to access has the public key there. So the thing about this whole thing is that right now, the computer you use to generate that public key that is available on your server, it is the only computer you can use to access your server. Until you do otherwise, like you do something else to it, it is the only computer. So if your computer crashes tomorrow, you no longer have access to your server. Do you get it? So if you want to be on the safer side, we'll look at how those things are. I mean, there are a lot of things for us to learn, but if you want to be on the safer side, it means you may have to even have multiple computers connected to your server so that anywhere you go, you can have access to it. But we'll look at that. I hope this is clear. So we could come here and disable, let's see, the root access should also be somewhere. No, it's not here. I can't seem to find root access. Anyway, I can't find it here, but yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I have this SSH key already. Is it that one that I have already that I have to?
I'm struggling to hear you, sorry.
I said I have this SSH key on my profile.
Okay.
I have to create another one, or I should use the same key.
No, if you have it there and the computer you use to generate is still the one that you are using, that means the computer still has that private key. So you don't need to generate a new one. But then if you didn't use that same computer, like for instance, somebody used Vagrant to generate it, but then right now he's trying to use Get Bash. These are a whole different system altogether, like the way it's working. Okay, so if it is the same computer, or let me say terminals, because we are using quite a number of terminals. If it is the same terminal that you used, then you can go ahead and use that same one. If not, you would have to generate a new one, go and update your profile with the new public key, then request for a new server. But let me sound a warning here. We are doing a lot of things on the server. Okay? So destroying your server is not always a good option. Right now, we are just starting. So make sure that you have been able to establish a connection. And that is all. Don't go touching and changing your public key and changing this. Because all the things you've done on it, you are going to lose them. And that means subsequent projects, if you need to build on something you've done already, let's say you've already installed the web server you are going to use to host your website, and now you've requested for a new server. The new server is empty. So you now have to go back and go and do all those things, configurations that you did to enable you now to continue with what you are doing. Okay. So if it happens that in the beginning, we can always destroy and start up a new server if it is not working. But then so far as the public key is there and you have access to the private key in the computer or terminal that you are using, then you are good to connect. Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Also, okay. All right. Great. So before we go on, the keygen, I wrote the command, but so the keygen that I talked about is just a utility or a tool that's available to generate SSH keygen. Okay. But then there are options that we can pass to it. So sometimes you are asked to pass options. You can go ahead and state the encryption algorithm to use. Okay, so you do that with the option T, the encryption algorithm to use. And I think in one of the tasks we were asked to use RSA. You remember RSA? We were given a task some time back about RSA. Come again?
That was how I got the public key in the first place.
Yeah, so that's fine. I mean, you could generate it with just this, but then if you don't enter the encryption algorithm to use, there is a default that is going to use. There are quite a number of them that are available. So you can go ahead and state that, hey, I need you to use RSA to generate it. Then you can also go ahead and state, sorry, I'm struggling to hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, I'm asking this this code now that I'm seeing on your screen. Is this how I open the server?
Is it how?
This is how I open the server.
It's how you did it.
I'm asking you if this is how I should open my server.
No. Relax, we'll get there. So now I'm just showing how to generate the key. We'll get to connecting to the server soon.
This is how it should.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we are trying to generate a key. And I said that you can just run SSH key gen and it will generate the key for you. Okay. But there are some options that you can provide to guide what you should use. So if you go this way, it's going to ask you a series of questions that you are going to provide answers to, and it will generate a key for you. But we can provide some options to it. I need you to use the RSA as the encryption algorithm, and I need you to use the size. So to size, I mean in bytes, you use the option -B and say maybe 4096. That's okay. The encryption key, I mean, the key that should be generated should be of this size. Then you may also want to tell it the passphrase to use, because if you don't ask for this, it will ask for a passphrase. I mean, if you don't provide that, it will ask for a passphrase. A passphrase is like, you know, you are authenticating into your system, okay? And this is like a connection that is easily done. You can, anybody at all with your computer can connect to it. So I can decide that I'll put a passphrase. That's like a password. It's just a phrase that anytime I'm trying to log in, it's going to ask me, what's your passphrase? And you say, hey, this. If it matches, then it will allow you to log in. If not, it wouldn't allow you. So you can also configure a passphrase. If you want to configure a passphrase, the option will be -P. You can ignore the passphrase. I think we were asked to use it in one task like that. Then you give it a figure. Then automatically this will be stored. The private key will be ID underscore, I think, RSA. I think so. Then the public key will be stored in this file .pub. Okay. So you can also go ahead and put an option that tells it that, hey, I don't need it to be stored in this default file. Put it in a file that we call, hey, my key. Okay. Then this is the option -F will detect which file should be used to keep that key that you are requesting for. So this is one, I mean, in fact, there are a lot more options, but these are some of the options that you can use when you are generating your SSH key. So if you see somebody doing this and you did just this, it isn't any different except that this person is specifying the things beforehand. Okay, so basically that is how you generate your key pair. And the key pair, remember, it's a pair. So there is always a private key and there's a public key. If you use this -F and you said my key, it's going to generate two keys for you. You have my key and my key .pub. This my key, which is your private key, don't expose it anywhere. If you expose this key, anybody with this key can have access to your server, the server that you've been given. Anybody with this, your private key, can have access to it. The reason being that your server has been configured or will be configured with your public key. So anytime any computer is trying to access that server, it's going to check, does this public key match with the private key that you are giving me? If it does, I will allow access. So those of us who are making a mistake of pushing our private keys to GitHub, we should be careful. I mean, right now we are just learning, so you think that it's nothing. But if you don't know the right thing, you go and do it in, I mean, your job or something, and someone will just, through you, hack your company. So make sure that this private key, if you need to make a backup anywhere, it shouldn't be exposed that anyone at all can have access to, because if they do, they can do damage to you. Now that we have generated this key, let's assume, let's start with how to connect. Then when we connect to it, I will do what I was about to do. How to connect to a remote server through SSH. So to connect to a remote server through SSH, it's simple. You just mention the protocol you want to use to connect SSH. You remember how you want to connect to, a website on the internet. You start by saying HTTPS, then whatever. We even have FTP, whatever. In the same way, to connect with SSH, you have to tell us the protocol you want to use to connect, and it's followed by the username at the server's name. Okay, but you know, a server is a computer, and computers are identified with what? IP addresses. So that means the server's IP address. As simple as that. So if I go ahead and I do SSH username, depending on the username that you've been given, then you do at 100.25.8.19. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to access this server. This server is going to check, do I have a username called this? Okay, this username is there. But then this computer that you are using to access me, does it have a private key that matches my public key? Okay, so now let me try accessing. Let me pick my server's IP address so that I will try accessing it. My server's IP address. Where are you? Where are you? Yeah, okay. So this is my server's IP address. Open the terminal. Then let's try connecting. So by default, we're all given usernames. If you are in an organization, definitely they will give you a username and you'll be told what your username is. But by default, we're given a username Ubuntu. Okay, so I'm trying to access this computer as the user Ubuntu. And my URL is onia.a. Did I say onia.100.25.19.204? Then hit enter. Wait for it to connect. The only way this is able to connect, it has connected successfully. The only way it's able to connect is because this server that I am in now, right now you can see that Ubuntu at 63210, that's the server's name. Okay, that's the host name that they've given it. So Ubuntu at this. The only reason why I'm able to log in is because that particular server has been configured to have my public key there. And this computer that I'm sitting on using to access it has a private key that matches that public key that the server has. So that's how come I'm able to access it. Okay, it's as simple as that. So let's see. In order to see, say the keys that are authorized here, let's see. We'll need to go to me. I've even forgotten, which is SSH. I'm coming. Hold on. The authorized keys. Should it be? I wrote it not long ago. Yeah, so it should be at the SSH directory. All right, so now I'm inside my server. I hope you can all see that. And I'm inside my server. And if I want to see, there is a file in the SSH directory. So let's cut that file and see the content. Go to home.ssh/ it's authorized keys, right? Authorized keys, yes. So if you enter this, these are the public keys that my system has been configured for right now. Pay attention. This is my own public key that I generated over here. So once I have this here, any private key that matches with this is able to access my machine or my server. I meant any computer that has a private key that matches with this will be able to have access to it. This is the key that we were asked to put there so that your checker can have access to your server as well. So let me mention this one as well. A lot of you run the checks, you've done everything, you run the checks and it's not checking. The reason is that now you are not just, even right now, the things we are doing, I'm not going to be concentrating on bash script. I'm concentrating on you understanding the concept, what is happening. If you understand and you are able to do it, writing a bash script is a very simple thing. You can even Google, then find out how do I write this, but then you know how to do it, so you can easily write it. Okay, so it is not just marking the bash script, it's also going into your server to check if you have done those configurations that your bash script is supposed to do. So you're not just, if I say write a bash script that generates a key pair, I'm not just focused on whether you have the right bash script, but then I'm also interested in, did you configure that key pair? So if you've done everything possible, you think your bash script is right, but then your checks are not checking, then it means that your server is not configured the way it's supposed to be configured. That's all that it means. Any questions on that? Let's go back here. So here, if you didn't add this key to your authorized keys in your server, it means the checker will not have access to it. That's all. You remember there was a task where you were supposed to copy some SSH key, public key, and keep it in your server. This is the key. So far as this key is not inside your server, the checker does not have access to your server, and for that matter, it will not be able to check those ones, and you always get that issue. So if you're having issues with checks like that, where you've done everything but it's not checking, go and make sure that you have the right public key here that the checker has access to it. And this was like the initial one that they did. So whoever created this server has it such that they have this key there and they can use to access it. That makes it good, because if you lose access to this, your keys, your private key that will match up with this, you can probably reach out to a mentor who will be able to access it through this. If you make the mistake of deleting all of these and signing out of this right now, in fact, I can delete it. I even deleted some yesterday. If you make the mistake of deleting everything and signing out, nobody will be able to access your server. And that will be the end of your server. I hope it makes sense. Okay. So now, if you need to, so let me explain in another way. Any of you has a server and wants me to be able to access your server. All that I have to do right now is I need to give you my public key. And you have to go and put my public key inside your authorized keys. Once my public key is inside your authorized keys, I am able to access your server. It's as simple as that. In fact, before I came here, I tried it. And I'm able to access a colleague's, not even one person. We've tried it multiple times. Okay, so basically, if you want somebody to be able to get access to your server, you would have to just grant them, share with them. If you want them to be able to have access to yours, you have to put their public key on your server that is inside this particular file, authorized keys, which can be found in the .ssh directory. Any questions? Any questions?
Hi, Doc.
Hi.
Sorry, can you just give us those dangerous commands so that we can have them before we run into these problems?
It's not dangerous as in dangerous, but then you should know everything that you are doing. Like right now, if you go ahead, this is a file that is here. I can open this in Vim, right? I can open this in Vim. So if I'm curious enough to open this in Vim and I go ahead and delete them. So this is it, right? These are the content of my Vim file. And I run dd, to delete. I've deleted all of them. So if I make the mistake right now to save this file, I'm doomed. Like I can't have access to it again. Checker cannot have access to it. My mentor cannot have access to it. And that is the end. I have to terminate this. Everything that I have done, including configuring my domain name, I have to go and do all those things again. Okay? So basically that is all that I'm saying. Let me be careful. What do I type? Q. Please don't save. Yes. Just to confirm that they are still there, let me run my cat Good. They are still there. So that is it. It's not like there is a danger. It's the same thing that we've been doing. Just make sure that you are not deleting the content of these authorized keys. And this also means that if you have any new computer or any other terminal that you think you are going to be using to access your server from time to time, all you need to do is go and generate key pairs there, copy the copy the public key and come and paste it here like I did. I run this, okay, sudo vim that, then I come in here and I do insert, then I paste my key here, save this file. Now I've given that computer access to this. In fact, I tried it. Haruna is here. I gave Haruna access to my server. Just we were testing his sandbox and he was getting issues from it. So I wanted to confirm if it was a problem with the sandbox or not. And I gave him access. He was able to access my server. I made him create a file, then I deleted it from my end just to experiment it. So if you want, just experiment with it someone. Just that these the three here are very important. The three here are very important. I've explained this is for checker. This is for your default machine, the one that you used to establish the connection first. Then this is for the mentors. So if you go ahead and delete any of these, you know that you are doing it at your own, peril. So you'd want to, yes, go ahead.
Okay, so what you are saying is any machine can be a host or a server. So
Yeah.
your own that is what you are saying. Like you can use when you establish a connection, the server will be recognizing the known host, and the client
Mm-hmm.
already your public key has already been put inside the server's authorized
Keys.
keys. And
Yeah.
okay, so if you want to connect to the server from, hold on please, let me.
Okay. So I don't know. Okay, let me get out. As you are looking for it, let me just continue. I'm exiting my server right now. If let me clear this. Pay attention. This is my server IP 100.25.19.204. Okay, that is it. But then I'm going to access a different server for you to see 34.204. If the owner is here, you should pardon me. But then it's just for experimenting purposes. So hopefully you should be able to, yes. So now you can see that I've logged into it, but that is not my server. But I'm able to log into it. Reason being that I've made this person put my public key on their server, their authorized keys on their server. So now I can have access to their server and do anything that I want to do on their server. Okay? If I exit this and I go with, let me clear this, try connecting to someone else that I don't know. So this dot 177. And let's see.
Okay.
This shouldn't work because now I don't have my public key on that person's system.
Okay, now it's server to server. I was trying, like I was missing off something.
Oh, okay.
Initially it was a server to sandbox, but what you are doing now is server to server. Okay, I get it.
But if you say server to sandbox, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, when we were requested, like we were required to generate an SSH key in our sandbox.
Okay.
Then after generating it and putting it on our profile, then when you request for a server, it automatically inputs your public key into the authorized keys of the server, right?
Yeah.
So, and when you establish a connection, the server's key, the server's public key will be inputted into your known host, something like that.
Oh, okay.
So in this case, and what I was trying to think, like what I was trying to ask is if you can make your sandbox a server, and like your sandbox
Try to
have an
access it.
authorized key, have an authorized key that someone can connect to something like that. But from what you did, I just saw that the connection is between server to server and not from the sandbox to server.
So the point is that you can do that. You can do that, but you would have to configure. You have to configure your sandbox to have the open SSH protocol. I mean, you set it up so that it becomes a server. Do you get
Then
it?
it will have an authorized key in it instead of just the known host.
Yes. So
Yeah.
that is you can read on OpenSSH. In fact, I think I was trying to do same with this my Ubuntu. I'm yet to set it up. I would have tested it for you. But then what it means is that any computer.
I mean, my question was not very clear, but I'm glad you
okay. Sure. All right. So connection timed out. It couldn't connect to this server. I don't know even if I'm not even aware if this IP address is a true one. I just tried it anyway. Okay. But then you realize I didn't connect because I don't have access to it. So even if it is there, I don't have access to it. So it won't allow me access. The other thing that people you might have come across is when you are running this, okay, let me show you my SSH keys, which should be found in SSH. So see this is ALX server _pub. So this is what I am using. When you are trying to connect to a server, this is like the default location where your computer searches for the private key that will match with that public key on the server. The default location is here. So if you don't have your file in here, if you don't have your private key in this particular location, then you always have to call the server with your default with your private key. Tell it explicitly where your private key is. So let's see, I think in the this particular tax, the SSH tax, so with the SSH tax, we were asked to generate a private key and a public key, right? So if I want to try accessing this, maybe I should use a terminal here and try it once for you to see. If I had a lot of time, I would have experimented with all of these for you to see. But then what I'm saying is that for those of you who have not or didn't create your SSH keys to this default location, you didn't put it in this location. What you have to do when you're trying to connect is this. You do SSH, then -I, then you pass the location of which is here. Currently, it is in my current directory. So I can do / then school. So tell us your private key. Before you now do Ubuntu at my service IP, I've forgotten again. Anyway. It shouldn't be far from. Okay. 100.25.19.204. So if I try it now, it's going to be, this is my identity file. Okay, so it's going to use this private key to try and access it. I don't know why it worked, but then probably from my configuration file. So let's try again. I want to see something because I've not changed my configuration file. No, exit this, then try again with verbose mode on. Sorry, let me try. Okay, so it's the verbose mode on. I'm able to see how it established that connection where it's searched for. Okay, so this is a lot of information, but just to be sure, applying this. I think it picked it from the hosts, the known hosts. Like it knows it already, it has a connection with it already, so it allowed me to access it. Okay, so that's possibly why. Otherwise, what would have happened was that it would try using this public key, trying to access it, and it wouldn't be able to access it because I don't have the corresponding public key on it. So all that I'm saying is that for those of you who don't have your private keys or your keys in that .ssh directory, you need to always introduce that -I to say that, hey, use this private key to access it. Okay, that's what that means. Any questions about SSH? I think we have done enough about it, and it should help you solve any problem about SSH that you have. Yes, any questions before we move on to web server? Yes.
So one thing that is confusing to a lot of people, I think the known host is like the inverse of the authorized key.
Yeah. So if you connect to a computer for a first time, you realize that it says that there's a prompt that says we don't know this computer. I've forgotten the exact prompt, but usually there's a prompt that you are supposed to type yes. So if you type yes, it will be put into your known host. This is like, hey, this computer, I know it. I have a relationship with this computer. So anytime you are trying to reach it, let me grant you access to it. And the authorized key is, just as Steven said, it's like this, but then it's on the server, and that one is going to check that the public key, your public key is here, doesn't match the private key you are bringing, then will allow you access. Okay, so the known host is just going to allow me easily access servers that I've already established connection with, and my computer knows about them. I can easily log into them. Any questions? Otherwise, let's move on to web service. Yeah, go ahead.
Can you please repeat that part where you explained about disabling the password?
Password
Like
authentication.
when I'm trying to get into my server, being asked to key in my password. So that part, I think I missed it. Sorry.
When you are trying to access your server, you are being asked for a password. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yes.
Has any other person gotten that issue? Has any other person gotten that issue?
Clarify. Are you being asked for a password or your passphrase?
Good point.
The Password to the server, not password.
Password to the server.
Yeah.
Hey,
Very
this thing
unlikely.
again. Yeah,
Let's
that's
take
what I'm also thinking about.
this
Very unlikely.
the server that was provisioned for you.
They've not set up a password. Like at
Or
least those of us who have has access to it, I don't think any of us have entered a password because we've not been given a password. And if you can't access it, you cannot, configure it, disable the password authentication. So for you to be able to get into the server itself and do that, then let me see. Cat etc ssh underscore config. So if it is your system that is asking, come in here. This has been commented out. Okay, so I know that some of us might have played with this. Personally, I did. I played with a lot of them. I changed them. But then before you do that, always make sure you have like a backup to be able to do that. Okay. So this in here is a password authentication for this your machine that you are working with. So I want to believe that if it is ever asking you, then probably it is coming from this, but I'm not too sure. So just go to, you can sudo vim, use any text editor that you like with sudo privileges and enter it. This is the location, etc/ssh/ssh underscore config. Once you get in, make sure that this is commented out. Okay, and I think by default, all of these things are working by default. So I still don't know why it will ask you, but then once we are done, you can always reach out to any one of us. Then we'll all troubleshoot together. At least it's good learning as such. Okay, great. Now we can move on. And some people also came in here to change the identity file, and they are not able to connect. Please pay attention to all of these things. Like this is like the default identity files that it goes to pick. It goes to use these ones. So if you've changed it and now you are no longer using the file that you stated as your identity file, then you have a problem. So make sure if you don't want any problem, you can always get the default. If you've tempered with it, I don't know how you're going to get the default, but try and get the default. Maybe you compare it to someone other person's own and check out the changes that you made that you probably shouldn't have made. And most of these configuration files, if you don't know what you are doing, please don't try. Like talk to people. You have colleagues, so speak to them, ask them about it. If they are not sure, talk to the mentors and find out before you make changes to configuration, especially going forward, because we've done a lot of things. If you end up spoiling it, hey, it's like I don't know. Adele, do you have that experience of destroying your sandbox from the early days of our training? You destroy your sandbox and now you have to go and redo everything.
I always knew better. So
Then good for you. Okay, I also didn't face it, but then I had people reach out to me after they had destroyed it. They wanted a way to easily get the whole thing back again. Once you've destroyed it, you've destroyed it. So now you've done your domain, whatever, you've done your website and everything, and you end up spoiling your configuration like that. You've messed up and you may have to go and reset everything. Okay, so let's get talking about web service. Time is fast spent. Wow. Oh my goodness. Web service, which we also have probably talked about a bit, earlier. So a web server is just an application that you place on your server that is going to serve web pages. Simple. Very simple. It's just what? An application on a computer. And its role is to serve web pages. People may want to be more specific by stating that you serve static web pages. So that's all it does. That's your HTML file, index.html, that you are going to put on your computer. For me to have access to it, you need a web server that will serve me this page when I try to access it over the web. Okay? So basically, that's what a web server is. And two common examples that you will come across is Apache and Nginx. Apache and Nginx are the two common ones that you will come across. So right now, we have already said that a server is basically a computer. So any computer can be used as a server. All you need to do is to configure your computer to work as the server. Okay, so if I go ahead and I install Apache or Nginx on my computer now has a web server on it, and therefore I can use it to serve web pages. So you want to host your own website on your own computer, this is the beginning. If you want to host a website on your own computer, you need to have a web server on your computer, and that web server would serve the web pages when anyone requests for it, even though it's not a good idea to host your own website on your computer. The reason it's not good is probably because of internet connectivity and uptime of your computer. Will your computer be up 24/7? Will it be, connected to the internet 24/7? Will it be able to survive the traffic if demand goes high for your website? Okay. Other than that, you can host your website on your own computer. Hi, Topzit.
Hey, wait, this guy is calling me.
No, I'm not calling you. Your mic is on, so you have to mute yourself.
I'm coming.
Okay, good. So that's basically what a web server is. And if I'm to, personally, I've been working with Apache for some time. So basically, all you are doing is you are creating websites on your local machine. You can access it on the local. No one has access to it on the internet. So it was a bit simpler for me to appreciate this. And now we are going to be working with Nginx. And just as it is, it's just a software. You need to install that software. To install the software, by now, we've been using Ubuntu for a very long time now. So by now, at least you should have a fair idea how to install things. And even if you don't have an idea how to install a specific thing, just a simple Google search should give the information out. You should be able to tell that, okay, this is the process to install Nginx. So, we're even given, or I think the tax gave it out. So with sudo privileges, you can do apt-get. And usually you want to start by updating your records. So apt-get updates, then you follow it with an apt-get install Nginx, right? This should help us install it. Then one very important thing that we also need to configure is firewall. So most servers, will I say most servers because I'm not sure, but then servers, you can configure your server to have firewalls that prevent some form of connections and allow other form of connections. It's very important. For instance, when you have, let's say, your database server, you want to configure it such that people cannot access your database from the internet. They can't use any other protocol to access it except SSH. Okay. One day when we get time, I have some free AWS credits. So maybe one of these sessions, I'll just log on to my AWS account and we'll try all of these things on it.
for this project, sorry, I've not gone through most of these projects, but
Okay.
why didn't they just ask us to install a web stack instead of installing this?
What do you mean by web stack?
A web stack like a XAMPP or LAMP or all that.
Okay. All right. So what if, for instance, let's take XAMPP that you are calling out. XAMPP has, this is XML, this is Apache, this is MySQL, Perl, PHP. I think XAMPP does not have Python. Yeah, I think it does not have Python. So that is Perl, PHP.
It works with Python as well.
XAMPP. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure about that. I know that P represents Python, PHP, Perl, but XAMPP, I've not used it for Python before. So, yeah. So, all of these things will be in there. That's what you are saying. But then, this is like a proprietary software that you use. I mean, personally, I even have XAMPP installed on my system at the moment, and I use it to run my stuff. Okay, but then I believe that one, we are trying to use Engine S for a reason. The advantage of getting the reverse probably, which we will later look at, especially when we start looking at load balancing.
Okay, I think
that is one.
I think this route is more complicated. Maybe they want us to use the complicated route.
No, it's not complicated. I mean, you'd have to appreciate it. Like, you can't just go ahead and install all of this and say, when I install a simple software, it does all of it for me. So that is the best option. So this isn't like complicated, but then it exposes you to the core. So it's like, hey, instead of installing all of these, try installing just Apache, install MySQL, install this. Because what if you don't want to be using MySQL? You just wasted space by installing all of these. Are you going to be using Perl? Are you going to be using PHP? Okay, but then we have full control over what we want to use and what we install at any point in time. And I feel this is way better than just going to install XAMPP. In fact, personally, I don't have a good feeling about XAMPP anymore, because the MySQL server keeps crashing every now and then. Yeah, so that is my thought on it. But then it's good you learn how to do the individual ones. Then you know that at any point in time you can create your own stuff. Because if you use XAMPP, for instance, to build an application, you would have to always package your application with XAMPP. That means anybody who is going to use that application has to install XAMPP on it. But then now we are learning about Docker and co. You can combine this with your application in there and just give that to the user. Okay, I don't know if you understand it, but then that's how I understand it.
I'm getting what you're saying.
Okay. All right. So after installing the firewalls are like, hey, let's regulate who can have access to it and who cannot have access to it. So I was going to use an example which I wrote here, SSH. What was I? Oh God. I was doing something that I did today at SSH. Who remembers? Database server. Yes. So I was talking about, if you have a database server and you want only your database guys to have access to it, you have to be able to block access from the internet. Anyone using HTTP, which is port 80, anyone using HTTPS, which is port what? Port what? 443. Hey, I hope that's it. 443, right? Please save me. I'm trying to forget this thing. So you can block any of these with your firewall, then only allow SSH entry, okay, which is port 22. You only allow SSH entry. So in the same way, it depends on, I mean, these things is just messing in my head right now. but it depends on the configuration of the server. So I think launching a server on AWS, for instance, like all the other ports inbound, so we have inbound and outbound ports, or transport protocols, the protocols. So inbound and outbound protocols. Okay. So by default, I think all inbound protocols are closed. Like you stop them inbound, they are all closed, So nobody else can access your server by default. Okay. And outbound, I think outbound, there is a rule that permits some outbound so that your server can access some things outside. But then you can go ahead to configure all of these and say that, okay, for inbound, I'm going to only allow SSH. Or for inbound, I'm going to allow only HTTP. Or for inbound, I'm going to allow only HTTPS or FTP. So you will control this. So in the simplest way with our Engine S and our server that we are working with, we are able to use UFW as our firewall. So if UFW, I think it comes pre-installed on the server, right? I think so. But if it is not, then you have to install it and enable it. So the first thing you will do is install and enable if it is not installed already. Then after enabling it, you have to allow for port 80. The reason why we are allowing for port 80, which represents HTTP, is because the domain that we are going to buy and attach to this server doesn't have SSL certificate. So if any of you have bought the domain already, you realize that you had to take this off because you didn't pay for it. And that means that your protocol will not be HTTPS. If it was HTTPS, we would have to allow port 443. But now we know that our domain isn't secured. So for that matter, we are going to be using HTTP. Hence, we have to allow port 80. Okay? We have to allow port 80 just to permit that. If you don't allow port 80, I think by default, all inbound access is blocked. So if you don't allow port 80, even after connecting your domain to this IP address, you still will not be able to access the server. And that is, if that happens, the only reason that is so is because it has been blocked. The port has been blocked. Remember, a port is just like a window that allows access into something. So on this server, if I say port 80 has been blocked, it means that window through which HTTP request will go through has been blocked. They can't enter. In the same way, if I block the port for SSL, if I go ahead and I block port 22, it means that you no longer can have access to it. I think yesterday in one of the WhatsApp groups, I saw someone was complaining that he has restricted access and now he's locked out and he doesn't know how to get in. If you go and, lock yourself out by blocking all of these ports, no one will be able to access your system again. So all that you are supposed to do in our case is just to go and allow port 80. Okay? A simple Google search should show you how to do this. If you don't know how to do it, just say search on Google how to allow port 80 on a Ubuntu server. Simple. Maybe I should just, we are running out of time, so I want to rush things. But then I hope that makes sense. So we are to allow port 80. So if you've done everything and your domain is not able to, you are not able to get access to your website, then know that you are probably not allowing port 80. And if you are not allowing port 80, you won't be able to get inside it. Great. Once we have Engine S installed or any other web server installed on our computer, there is usually, depending on the web server, there is usually a default location where web pages are to be stored. Okay? Anytime you install a web server, there is a default location where web pages should be stored. So with Nginx, we have the default location being var www, then HTML. This directory is where you are supposed to store the files. That is, your website files are supposed to be stored in this directory. If you store it in any other directory, there is a lot of things you have to do before you are able to save them. But if you want to save them by default, they should be inside this directory. I hope it makes sense. Let me locally, I think I have XAMPP. I would open it and show you something quickly. Let's see. So depending on the web server that you are using, so here on my local machine, I have XAMPP as a web server on it. This is XAMPP, and in XAMPP, that directory, so you should know for it. I mean, this is not part of the work we are doing. I'm just telling you that, you see, when I open XAMPP, there's a lot of folders, but there's a specific one that serve the web pages, and in XAMPP, it is the htdocs. So you have to open htdocs. htdocs is like www in the Nginx. So these are like websites files. Like here, you can see that I've created a website here, so you can access it on. If I turn XAMPP on right now, you should be able to access that website. For Nginx, this is the specific directory that you need to go and keep your things in. In fact, the ideal directory is this, just this part. Okay, the www. But then for now, let's stick with the HTML because it has a reason. I mean, there is a reason why we have this there. Okay, so we are going to put all your web files that you want to save inside this directory. Then the simple task that we've been given is that create a simple website, and that website, all that it does is it does what? Says hello world. Simple. So how do you go about it? You know that every website has an HTML file that displays on the screen. So here you just need an HTML file, okay? But then there is a default hierarchy through which your web server searches for a file to save. So, if only I remember accurately, the web server always goes into the default directory. Remember, we've established that this is our default directory, www.html. It goes into this directory, and the first thing it's looking for to save is index.html. Okay, index.html. If index.html isn't there, it will start looking for index.php. And I think there is another one, but at least I remember these two. Okay, so if we create an index.html, that is the very first file that is going to be saved when we try to access this web server. I mean, the URL to this web server. So you have to make sure that you have index.html. If you don't have index.html and your house there, what it's going to do is that it's just going to list out all those files. So it will list them out. Let's say you created main.js, styles.css. It will list them all for you. It will not display anything because the file that it looks for to display is the index.html. Or yes, so I think there's a hierarchy. I've forgotten. It's been a long time since I did these things. It's HTML, then there is index.php, then it comes to home.html, and home.php, I guess. So if it doesn't find index.html, it looks for this. If it doesn't find it, it looks for this. If it doesn't find it, it looks for this. But then it should find any one of these to display it to the screen. So in our case, we are just dealing with the index.html. So we just have to go into this directory. and go and create an index.html file. Does someone wants to ask a question?
So you said if you don't have index.html, it will display the list of the files. Does it mean if assuming you have your domain hosted somewhere, and someone accesses it, can the person have access to your files? If someone accesses your domain, assuming you already have a domain set up.
Yeah. So if you have and you don't have HTML, the index.html, yes, they will see the files there.
They will see and have access to it. They can open it and have access to everything.
Yes. Your HTML, CSS, JavaScript files are always open. They are always open, like they are public.
I think the back end is not always open.
Yes, so that is depending on how you configure it.
Yeah. So in this case, I don't know if they can have access to the back end. You know, if you copy a website like with httrack, the httrack will copy all the JS and others, but it doesn't copy the back end because it's secured. So I don't know if in this case they can have access to the back end as well.
Yes, so that's why I'm saying that it depends on how you've configured the whole thing. Okay, we've mentioned that you have your web server, you have your application server, you have a database server, and you restrict access to all of these. So now you've granted access. We can use, the port 80 to access your web server. So with your application server and your backend files, what is the restriction to them? Have you done it such that they don't have access to that? If they are all on this particular server as we have right now, and you don't have an index.html file to display, I bet you will find everything. Like, this is based on my own personal experience. It's not like something I've read somewhere. Okay, my XAMPP is not working correctly. I would need to configure it. Otherwise, I would have just opened this particular file for you to see. But if I try right now, I'm going to be getting some errors. So let me not go there. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you haven't configured it well, the person will have access to, like, it will list these files there. And once these files are there, I can see what you have in them. Do you get it? So it all depends on the configuration you do. And we are working towards it. So definitely along the line, we are going to learn how to do all of these ones. Okay. Yeah. Let's not jump. Yeah, you would appreciate it soon. Later. Okay. So now we need to have a index.html file. I still need access to my server. I need to keep this thing somewhere. Maybe I should create an alias to connect to my server. I think that would be a good thing, right? Maybe everybody should go and try. Create an alias to connect to your server. So
I did that. It makes it very
okay. Okay. Then I'll go and I'll do that after the session. Because every now and then I have to start looking for IP address. Can't I do this? I think it should work. But my my domain, it should work, right? Let me see. It's now trying to access it. Yeah, it works. So I don't need to remember.
Because you connected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've connected it already, so I can just use the domain name to access it.
Yeah.
Okay. So now remember the directory that I mentioned. So let's go look for that directory. Do ls var www. Let's see what's in here. We only have HTML. Okay. So let's see what's inside that HTML directory. HTML. I have done the tags. That's why you see the 404.html and index.html. But if you just installed it, all you will see is this particular one. Okay, and that will be what will be displayed if these ones are not there. This will be displayed if these ones are not there. So you'd want to go ahead and create index.html. How do you do that? You can use Vim. Let me cd into that location so that www.html, then let's sudo Vim index. Since I already created it, index.html, let's get into it. And you see that in this file, I only have hello world in there because that's what they asked me to do. But then you can go ahead and put anything, any website you want to host, you put it in here. But for now, you are just doing your master's bidding. So this is what you were asked to do. Make sure you have a file like this in that location. Once you do, quit this. Once you do, let's open a different terminal. Once you do, if I tell, okay, so here, right here, once I'm connected to the server, if I tell localhost, we've learned about localhost already, right? If I curl localhost, yesterday we did curl, so by now you should appreciate what it is. It's giving me the content from that web page, and that web page for our localhost is what? Index.html, because it is a default file that a web server will save. So that default file, this is what it returns, and that is what is showing me when I do curl this. Okay, this also means that if I go to a browser and let's open a browser and do something like this, trying to access my IP address on the internet. If you haven't allowed port 80, this will not work. But then, since I have allowed it, it's able to go into my server and display what is in there for me. So hello world is there. You can see it's not secured because we are not using the SSL, right? Yes, so basically that is what you are supposed to do for that part. Okay, then you are supposed to set up a domain to connect to this. I'm not going to go to the platform and show you, but mention a few things, a few pointers that will help you out. So if you are going to set up a domain, just buy your domain, whatever your domain is. So in my case, it's ehonia.tech. Okay. By now, you should appreciate some of these terminologies. The .tech that you have here is known as the domain extension. And we have a lot of them. Okay, so you can see .com, .org, .net, and a host of them. Since we've been given this for free, you should just go ahead and use it. The thing is that you have access to it for just 1 year, and domains are renewable annually. So that means every year you would have to renew if you still want to keep it. Okay, .tech domains are not the least expensive amongst them. At least .com is very affordable. .com is very affordable. So maybe if after the 1 year you still want to probably host your own portfolio or a website, you get a client that you want to host a website for, you may consider any of these. They are quite cheaper comparing to this. But then .tech also has, it shows that you're a tech guru. So if you have the money, you can always stick to that. Yeah. So when you purchase the domain, this is like, by now you should know what DNS does. This is like a nice name that we need you to, you can easily remember this, right? as against remembering 100.25.19.204. So what does this do? The DNS enables us to connect or point this to this IP. So that instead of remembering 100 dots blah blah blah, I only need to remember awonia.tech. This is like your phone book. You don't just go and save people's contact 0245558 whatever. You don't just save it like that. You add what names to it. Then the next time you are searching for the contact, you don't go and type the number because you don't remember, but you remember the name, so you search for the name. So that's what is happening. We are just giving a name to this IP address so that we don't have to always remember the IP address. We'll only call the name. Then to be able to do that, we purchase the domain name from a registry. And after purchasing it, we need to point the domain name to the server where we are hosting our website. So anywhere at all that you purchase a domain, you need to point that domain name to the server where you are hosting it. For some domain name registry, companies, okay, common ones that you may come across, GoDaddy, Namecheap, Bluehost. Most of these offer both hosting and domain name sales. So you can decide to purchase both the hosting, which is like, hey, I'm purchasing space on your server. I want to keep my files on your server. So that is the hosting part. And the domain name. The server that I'm purchasing from you, or the server space I'm purchasing from you, has an IP address that you are going to give me. But I don't want to keep that IP address in my head. So let me attach a domain name so that that domain name will always be pointing to that IP address. And I just need to remember the domain name. But in our case, we are buying the domain name from one company and we are hosting on a different platform. Okay, so there are times like that. Personally, for any website I host, I usually buy my domain name from Namecheap. It's cheaper over there. That one I can attest to it. Then I host my site on TMD hosting. So what I have to do is that after purchasing the domain name, I have to make sure I direct this domain name to this server. Okay, the IP address here. But then there is a bit of technicalities because this particular server that we are using, you are not the only one using it, and there is. So there is another system that we use to do that connection. Remember, this is not exactly what we are going to do, but I mentioned it just so you know, and if you get any web design, web development contract, you know how to approach this. So what you have to do here is you change what we call the name service. The name service tells the domain name which, server that it should go to. Okay, so by default, if you buy a domain name from Namecheap, by default, the name service points to the Namecheap service. So if you are now going to host it at TMD, then you need to now point your name service to that of TMD. So each of these companies have their name service. You see something like ns1. Maybe cloud.tmd something, ns2. Like that. Those are the name servers. So you need to point them like that. But in our case, where we are just going to point the domain name directly to an IP address, we are pointing the domain name directly to an IP address. To do that, so let me put IP address here. To do that, we use what we call the A record. So to help you point a domain name directly to an IP address, use an A record. And that is if the IP address is IP version 4, which we've by now know about already, that we have IP version 4 and IP version 6. If your IP address that you were given, because sometimes some servers that you get, they give you the IP version 6. If it is IP version 6, then you have to create what we call an AAA record. So if you come across it, AAA record is for IP version 6. IP version 6, whilst the A record is for IP version 4. Once we are around this, let me also mention, remember, a record is for what? Domain to IP. Domain name to IP. But there are times that you want to redirect one domain name to another domain name. I hope you see something like that before, where you are searching for one domain name but it's sending you to another. Okay, to do that, you have to configure what we call the CNAME. So CNAME is from domain name to domain name. A record is from domain name to IP address, which is of the type IP version 4. Let me show you an example. How I wish we had a lot of time to do practice with all of this. If I do blog.eoniaobel.com, this is a domain name, or technically a subdomain, because the domain name itself is eoniaobel.com, but the sub is the blog that is attached to it. So blog.eoniaobel.com. Ideally, this should have gone to my own, let's say, domain server, eoniaobel.com. But then I've redirected this using CNAME so that it goes to hashnode. Okay, so this is going to hashnode.com/ so here. So you come to this blog and this is what you see, but then this is the actual URL that it sends you to. Okay, except that I have done a redirect using the CNAME. Please pay attention. These are very important, especially if you are going to be doing any form of freelancing for clients, because sometimes the person already has a domain and he wants to redirect that to the new domain. And you should know, if you are going to connect a domain name to another domain name, you use CNAME. Let me list them. I've mentioned name servers. Name servers, you are going to use the name servers if
Water.
Go ahead. Hi.
I might not be saying this since I'm planning on getting water.
Hi, sorry. I need to mute you. Okay. So with the name servers, what I mentioned was that by default, where you buy the domain name, your name servers are set to that company's name service. I mean, they are their service. Okay, it's pointing to their service. So if you want to point it to another company's service, then you have to reset your name service. Okay, that's the first thing. And that's the common one that you are going to be facing. If right now somebody says, hey, build me a website, and you decided to go and buy the domain name from a different company and hosting from a different company, what usually happens, like you see that these people, like myself, the one I use, TMD hosting, I like their hosting packages, I like their support, their customer care service and everything, but then their domain names are quite relatively expensive. So then you go and buy the domain name from Namecheap. Then you need to connect it to that of TMD service. So through what? Name service. That's what you do. Then we have the A records. A records is where you have the server's IP address and you want to point the domain name to the server. So you go and change the A records, set the A records. We'll look at it right now. Then if the IP address you had is IP version 4, you're going to set rather the A records. Then finally, I talked about CNAME. So those of you, if let's say right now, you have already gotten your domain, that is the .tech domain, and you want to create a blog on Hashnode, where that blog, instead of people finding you using hashnode.something, let's say in my case right now, my domain is ehonia.tech. If I want people to access my blog on Hashnode using the say blog.ehonia.tech, all I need to do is go and create CNAME record on my dashboard, my .tech dashboard. Okay, then change the set the C name, the value of the C name to my blog, which is hashnode blah 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 / something something. Okay, so some of you, I mean, you should be adventurous enough. Now that you've gotten the domain name, try practicing with these things. A lot of us may end up taking freelance gigs because as you are learning these things, the only way to get real life experience is telling people, hey, I can build you a website, give me the contract, then you go do these things. So it's very important we mention them. And that's why when I'm learning, I like to learn and see the practical use of things. And that's the same reason why when I'm teaching, I don't want to just focus on what was required of us, but every other thing that we need to know. So hopefully by now you know the differences and when the use cases for any of these. So with the A records, when you go to set the A records, the good thing is that you can decide that I want to point only in this particular, say, blog.ewania obed. Okay, so I don't want to go and open my .tech dashboard right now, but let me mention this. So to go and figure it after you have created your, you've bought the domain, after you've created your account with .tech, I think their site is what? Get.tech. Is there anyone here who hasn't configured his domain so that I know whether to go in there or not? Or everyone here has been able to configure their domain? Right. We've all configured our domain.
Actually, I have not configured, but I've done that before, like many years ago. So I have
Okay, that's fine. All right. I don't know if this thing is going to, I mean, it may not even log in. So when you log into your account, you definitely need an account to have access to it. So for every platform that you are going to use to purchase your domain name, you need an account with a platform, right? And when you log into that account, the next thing you want to do is locate your specific domain that you are going to use, or on your dashboard, go to DNS management. Okay. And DNS management, you choose that specific domain name that you want if it is allowed. Let me try accessing my Namecheap account. If it is allowed, then you under DNS record, you'll be able to add A records, add C records, C name records, add A records, and all of those things. You'll be able to do it. So depending on what you are looking for, you know which one to go with. So in our case, you make sure you look for DNS management and you go with A records. And with the A records, all that you are going to do is we want the whole domain name that we have gotten, which is in our case, let's say ewania.tech. Ewania.tech. I want this to point to the IP address. But then you see when you are trying to set it, you see the IP address here, right? You have a space to enter the IP address, and you have a space to enter the host name. But then with the host name side, you'll be given a space here, .ewania.tech. That is the domain that you chose. If I want to only direct this subdomain to the IP address I'm going to put there, then I can go ahead and put the subdomain here. Okay, but in our case, we want the whole domain itself, not any subdomain. So what do? Leave this empty. Don't put anything in there. Then come and put your IP address here. .something. This means that anytime somebody types in ewania.tech, it's going to take them here to this IP address. You also want to go ahead and add another host name, which would be the asterisk. So in this box, you put an asterisk dot ehonia.tech. What does this mean? It also means that any subdomain at all that is used from this ehonia.tech domain, I want it to point to this server. So all that I've done right now is I've directed everything relating to ehonia.tech to this particular IP address. So if somebody goes and searches blog.ehonia.tech, it should take them to this server and go and look for a corresponding file to this domain if that configuration has been done. If not, it will definitely throw a 404 error. Okay? In the same way, that means that you can go ahead and use www.ehonia.tech and that will also work. But if you configure just the first one, that's the empty space, and you don't configure this other one, you may not be able to use the www. Or you may not, if somebody points in the subdomain, they will tell you it doesn't exist. Okay? Or you can't access connection failure or something. Yeah. So any questions about that? At least when you go into your server, I said you should look for DNS. Hey, I mean your accounts with the DocTech people. Look for DNS management. And under DNS management, you are going to add an A record. And in A record, you are going to set your domain name under the, by default, it will even be provided. But then don't put anything here. Just put your IP address here, save that one, then create another one. That is add another A record. Put asterisk here, then your domain name, the same IP address, and you are good. If you are doing your own stuff, this means that you can actually point each and every subdomain to a different IP, provided you have servers and you want to be able to access them with different IP address. I hope that makes sense. My goal is for you to understand and be able to do it on your own. So please, if you don't understand any of them, just let me know. Why is this thing not coming up? Yes. This thing is going to waste my time. Okay, let's go on. So now that we've configured our domain name, to point to our IP address, and we have already created the index.html file in there. This means that when we go ahead and type the domain name, it's going to get access to that HTML file. The next important thing, I think, which should be more of the final bits, is your redirection. Okay, so redirection is a cool thing to know about, because there are instances where you need to redirect a particular domain name. For instance, if your company happens to change your domain name, you should be able to redirect the old domain to the new one. Okay, or you've moved the files that you created from one location to the other location, and you need to do that redirection to have access to the new one so that your users, there's no break in the links that is already available online. For those of you who have any form of knowledge on search engine optimization, you would appreciate this better. If you don't have any knowledge and you long to get into web development, it's something that you at least need to know. SEO, that is search engine optimization. With search engine optimization, one of the key things we pay attention to is what we call backlinks. People have linked to content on your website, okay? And that usually helps give your website authority in the eyes of Google, okay? Especially if the people linking to your site are like big websites. So if now they were linking to a resource, let's say you created a SSH guide on your website and everybody loved it, and because of that, all of us who were writing content on SSH decided to link to your guide and tell people that if they want more information, they should look at your guide. So let's use my, say, ehonia.tech/SSH guide. So everybody has linked to this address. Then along the line, I've written a lot of content, so I want to restructure my website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create directories for the various categories that I created content in. For that matter, I end up creating a directory called SSH. And that SSH directory now contains all my SSH related articles. So my new URL becomes ehonia.tech/SSH/SSH guide. Remember that we have thousands of people already linking to this. And I can't go to each of them. In fact, I don't even know the people who are linking to my website. So I can't go to each of them and tell them, oh, I just made an update to my URL, so kindly update this. Because as soon as Google finds that this URL does not exist anymore, it's devaluing you. And you don't want that to happen. Like, you want to protect your SEO. Okay, you want to protect your authority. Okay, so therefore you need to redirect this URL to this your new URL, so that somebody clicking on this URL will still get access to the guide, even though the guide is at a new location. Let me use an example that you are aware of. If WhatsApp, when you are using WhatsApp, somebody whose contact you have already, the person changes contact, and WhatsApp prompts you that so and so has changed their WhatsApp number. Click here to add. So that's like an example that I'm giving. So there are situations that you really need to redirect an existing one to a new one. And how do you approach that? That is what we are going to look at. So the web server that you have configured using Nginx has a default configuration. And that is found in its configuration file, the default configuration file, which we are going to look at soon. But then inside this configuration, that is where everything about the web server, the files that it sets, and all the rules that you want to configure, that is where they go to. So if you want to be able to redirect, then you have to go into that config file and redirect whatever you want to redirect. So let's say, with the example we are trying to redirect ehonia.tech. We are redirecting this SSH guide to the new URL, which is ehonia.tech. But in fact, you can redirect it to anything, like anything that you want. It depends on the peculiar situation you find yourself in. SSH, then SSH guide. Okay. So this is what we are going to be doing right now. To be doing this, now we've already configured our name to be this, so it becomes easier. With the Nginx configuration file, there are two ways that we can go ahead to do the redirection. I mean, there are two commands that we can use, if I should call them commands, that we can use to do the redirection. At least from my reading, I came across those two. The first one is what we call rewrite. In fact, I was writing an article on this whole thing. I'm yet to finish, so I haven't published it. Let's see. Let me see if I can grab it and why are you also taking long to load? Okay. Yep. So I was trying to write an article to explain them, but it's not ready, so that's why I haven't published it yet. Oh. All right. So as soon as it comes, I'll show it. But then we have the rewrite command. Then we have the return command. So you can use any of these commands. And basically all that you are doing is rewrite the first URL to this URL. Then you tell it the type of redirect that you want to do. So by now you would have read on the HTTP status codes, or HTTP status code, right? 400, 404, and 500 and co, 300 and co. I believe now you've read on it, so I shouldn't spend a lot of time on it. But two in particular that I'll mention here is 301 and 307. So 301 is used for permanent redirects. Permanent redirects. So in a case where, let's say, your company has changed names, an example, there is this company that I follow on Twitter. They used to be called Micro Acquire. Micro Acquire. So that's what they were using, microacquire.com. Now they've rebranded to acquire.com. So if you are redirecting this to this, you know that you are not going back to this address. So what do you have to do? You have to do a permanent redirect to this. Okay? But there are times that you are just doing some form of maintenance on a server, and for that matter, you've moved your files to a different location. Once the maintenance is done, you're going to bring it back. In that case, you should do a temporary redirect. So 301 is usually for permanent redirect. Then 307 is for temporary redirect. Okay. So to use this, let me see if this has come. This will be the old URL that I'm going to redirect. Then this will be the new URL that I want to redirect to. Then this will be whether I want to do a permanent redirect or a temporary redirect. So I can say permanent for this. Okay. Let's see. Oh, this thing hasn't come. Okay. Anyway, so basically, first of all, we need to probably get into our server. The reason I love to show it on the blog post is because, yeah, I've added all those things there. Are you refreshing again? So that I may not have to necessarily go into my terminal. But then I have not learned how to use the return, so I can't comment on that, except that if you find it anywhere, it is also a way to use. But then I have only come across I only use the rewrite. Okay. And since we already know, we've configured the server we are on, the default server we are on, we've configured it to have a particular, how is it called? Domain name. If we want from something else, we could just start by saying this, SSH guide. Okay. But then starting from this part. So you have that your caret symbol, then followed by this to be the old URL. So this one comes. So you have your rewrite here, followed by this line. Then wherever you want to redirect this to. So if you want to redirect it to youtube.com, you write youtube.com here. Okay, youtube.com. Whatever you want to redirect, write that address here. Then I want to do a permanent redirect, so I just do permanent and semicolon. Okay. If I want to do a temporary redirect, I can just go ahead and write redirect instead of permanent. Okay. Any questions on those ones? Hey, this thing doesn't want to open today. When it opens, then it starts all over again. That's sad. Yes, any questions on that? So maybe I should open my server, then we get into it. Coming. I mean, my notes is becoming plenty. Yeah. So this is what I was looking for. The configuration file can be found at etc/nginx/sites enabled. As a site enabled on this particular server, then we want the default one. So let's open the terminal since this is not coming on. Let's open the terminal. Oh, you came? Okay. I don't think you see it well. Anyway, let me go and open the terminal. There are a lot of programs running on my computer right now, so it's a bit slow. Claire? Oh. It has to break that connection with the server before. Open a new one. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's try connecting to my web server. Ubuntu at ahonia.tech. Okay, and let me do clear. All right, so on this server, we are just, since we've already installed Nginx, so we can go ahead and access the site enabled on Nginx, enabled, then default. Great. So by opening this, I just use the cat command, just so those who do not know, to open this, to display the content of that file. And this is what you see in here. So this is the default server configuration. And that is where we are going to make the changes inside this server. This is the server that is serving as the default server we are working with. So we are going to make some configuration changes to it. And basically, we just need to add a rewrite rule in here. So within this server, we just need to add a rewrite rule. And remember, I said with a rewrite rule or redirect rule, we can add it using rewrite or return. But I know about rewrite. So in my case, what I did was I put it down here. Okay. So this is redirect. And remember, I said the caret, then the backslash redirect underscore me, and that's what we're asked to do. So in essence, let me show you something quickly. So this is how the file looks like. You probably will not find this particular thing in there if you are yet to do it. You won't find this redirect in there if you are yet to do it. But then it is when you do it that you find it. So instead of cutting, let me go into it. Okay. So I'd rather use Vim to access it. So let me just pass a comment. Those who have always been wondering why we're being forced to learn how to use Vim, Nano, and Emacs. By default, after this server was given to me, I haven't done any installation with regards to test editors on it. But then I have access to Vim to use. There are some organizations that when you are given access to a server, you don't have permissions to install applications on that server because the server is already configured with the things that you need. There is a policy that we call least privilege policy. Okay, so when they are setting servers for workers, they give you the least privilege possible for you to get your work done. So you get a situation where you can't install. Right now, I've not tried it. Maybe I can install VS Code on this one and use it. But then know that there are times that you may not have that liberty to create or install things that you want. For that matter, you need to also get yourself acquainted with some of these things. Vim, Nano, Emacs, at least those ones usually come with it. So that is one thing that we need to take note of. Okay, so now I am in to edit this file. Getting to the end already. So to edit this file, you definitely need to go into insert mode. Go into insert mode and let me add a new redirect rule here. Okay. Usually when I'm editing text files, what I want to do is I want to create enough space between those that existed and these ones that I'm adding so that I can easily spot them out. The other thing you can do is just add a comment and say that this was added by me. This part was added by me. It's a comment, so it doesn't do anything. But anytime you come in there, you know the changes that you made. Okay? So that if you need to reset it to default, you know how to reset it to default, or you know the changes that you made, and therefore you can always reset to the default. All right. Then what I would write is rewrite. And I want to redirect, say, blog to already redirected this to my blog, but then let me also redirect this to my blog. So I'll say blog.ehoniaobed.com, but this time around not a permanent redirect, so I'll just say redirect. This is all, like this is all you needed to do to redirect from one side. This is redirecting from ehonia.tech/blog to https blah blah blah, and I said this could be anything. Okay, or maybe I should just change this for testing purposes. Send it to YouTube. Okay, so youtube.com/@ehonia.obed. Okay, then okay, so I'll change this as well. Instead of blog, let me make it YouTube. Then we'll test it afterwards. All right. So now, by doing this, I have redirected from YouTube, ehonia.tech/YouTube to this particular YouTube channel. So let's store this or save it. Get out of it. After getting out of this, well, I have to make sure that Nginx is running, and I have to restart Nginx for it to now, remember when you started it, it picked the configuration, and that's what it used to start the server. The web server. Remember, when we are saying server, you should start thinking about it. Which particular server are you talking about? Is it like the computer, or is it the web server you're talking about, or is it the database server or the application server? Now you are technical, so you should appreciate these individual terminologies. When this web server, Nginx, was started, it went to pick the initial configurations and used it to start that web server. Now you've made changes to the configurations. So what do you have to do? You have to restart Nginx so that the new configurations that you have made will be able to take effect. So just so we are on point, I'm coming. Let me show you. I just look for it. Yes, so this is what I just did. I showed you here. If you want to do it permanent, that is what is here. Okay, so now ehonia.tech/YouTube. When we run this, we should find a 404 error page because it doesn't exist. Okay, so this is a 404 error page. And this is what we're tasked to do with our 404 error page. You should say, ceci n'est pas the French people amongst us. I think today they had something for you. So this is not a page. I guess that's what he's saying. This is not a page. Right? You're going to translate for us. Adeoli.
No, I mean, you're correct. You're correct. That's my point.
Okay. At least I haven't disappointed my friend teacher. Okay. So what we are going to do now is when we restart, remember we wrote a rule to redirect this one. Okay. Previously, I've redirected this other one, which we saw earlier, redirect underscore me. I've redirected that, so it should take me to the site where I redirected it. And as soon as we restart our server, this should also do same. So this is where we have the redirection. You saw what I entered. I entered ewonia.tech/redirect underscore me. Meanwhile, this is where it brought me because I've redirected it to this. Now let's go back and restart our engine S. Restart engine S. That should be sudo oh god, forgotten this thing. Anyone to help me? It should be, how can I just forget? Yes. Oh, service. So we're told not to use systemctl, and I'm trying to remember the other one. Sudo service engine X, then restart. So this is the command that you can use to start. You just do sudo service engine S start to start it, sudo service engine S stop to stop it. Okay, so now we are interested in restarting it. So we do sudo service engine S restart, and that restarts our web server for us. So our web server has been restarted. Let's go refresh this. I hope you know something called cache. So if I did it and it didn't come, it probably would have meant that my browser has cached that one. So I may need to do a lot more refresh or clear the cache before it shows up. But now you can see that it has changed from what it used to be and is going to my YouTube channel. Okay? And that is the power of redirection. So I don't know if any of you have seen me do this thing, that almost every link that I share to my groups, they are like correct. I mean, if the Telegram group, for instance, you find me do eweniaobed.com/Telegram group. I believe a number of you might have seen this. And this has been redirected to the link to our Telegram group. So when you search for it, it takes you to Telegram. And I've done that for almost every link, like my social media handles. If you want to reach me in person, you do anything eweniaobed.com/any social media account. So if you like go to Twitter/Twitter, you go to my Twitter account, /Instagram, you go to my Instagram, like any of them. And that's how I've done it. So basically, I've just bought a domain and I've redirected the domains to all of these platforms so that it's easy for people to access me. And the reason why I even did that is because it becomes a bit challenging when people start asking, give me a link to this or that, like what is your Telegram group? I think like people reach out on Twitter asking your Telegram group, and every now and then I have to go back to Telegram to and generate link and share it to them. WhatsApp link, I have to go. Then I say, hey, that is a lot of work to do. So let me just redirect these ones. And now off my head, eweniaobed.com/something, then I'll send it to you. So now that you have whatever.tech, okay? That's why I went ahead and used ewonia.tech. That's my surname. It was available. So it becomes easy for me. So all of you, please take it on. It's a challenge. I mean, go into your server, redirect that, your social media handles. And now when somebody asks you for a social media handle, just share that with them. Something.tech/Twitter, something.tech/Facebook, something.tech/ it's just nice. I mean, it's fun to do. It makes you learn. Like, you know, when we're tasked to do this thing, it didn't look new to me because this is something I've done before. So by doing this, the next time you meet somewhere else to, you know, oh, I've done this a couple of times, so this is really not a big deal. Yes. So the last bit will be the 404, and the 404 is simple. Just create a page inside this location. It was what www/html. This directory, that is where we had our index.html file. Go in there and create a 404 HTML file. Then inside this file, put whatever content you were asked to put, like the French that you were supposed to put in there. Put it in there. Okay. If that file is not there, like right now, if I go in and I delete it, it will show the default Nginx 404 error page, okay, or message. It will show that. But as soon as you put this there, it's not automatically going to pick this because Nginx has been configured to send some feedback anytime the status code is 404. It by default sends a message that says that 404 error, this doesn't exist, something like that. So you need to go and redirect that one as well. It's that simple. If you create a new page, all you need to do is go and redirect that one to your 404. Where did I do that? I hope I even remember. Yeah. So this is how we approach the page in particular. Remember, this is not like just redirecting to an outside directory or outside URL. This is like I'm redirecting you to a specific page. But then we are looking at when there is an error. Okay, so you need to come into that same file, the default configuration file, and make these changes. So your error page, that is specifically error 404, we want it to be set to 404.html. That is a file that you are supposed to go and create. Then the location, this is the location. So this basically, in fact, I think a simple Google will give that out. I found it on Google. So just look for it. If you can't find it, at least now you are seeing it. Try it and you should be able to do it. Error_page 404, then /404.html. Location is this, then this information internal. This is like we are doing an internal redirect. This is the root directory, and this is a specific location. So there's a specific location. This is a root, the root directory that we are in, or we want you to locate this file in. Then we are doing an internal redirection sort of. As simple as that. So by doing this, when there is an error, it redirects to that error page that you have created. And I think that brings me to the end of the session. Now time for questions, especially those of you who are having challenges with doing any of them. Let's quickly go through them and we'll end the session. Yes, questions? Questions? Or everyone is fine?
Hello. Hello.
Hi.
Please, I want to know if this video is being recorded.
Yes, please. It's being recorded. Hopefully, it's still on. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, it's being recorded.
Where will I get it, please?
It will be uploaded to YouTube, and the link will be shared in the Telegram group.
Okay.
So yeah. Except that nowadays my download speed is very, very slow. So I can't promise that it will be up in the shortest time. I think even our last session, I've not been able to download it yet. Because I have to download it from the Telegram server, then upload it to YouTube. But then it's going to be available, hopefully, by the close of the day or early tomorrow morning.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, hello, sir.
Hi.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Yeah, sorry, I want to ask a question. There's a
Sure.
in the file of where you edited the redirect stuff. I don't know, maybe you get what I'm trying to say. Yeah, there are some
Yeah.
other codes. There are some other code there. I want to ask that, are you the one that write the code, the other codes that are there, or they are default
No. So
codes?
they are default.
Oh, okay, that's what I want to know. So the only thing that we just need to do is just to if we need to redirect, to put our redirect code, we just have to edit that our own parts and put our redirect code.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So,
Thank you.
but you're welcome. With the tasks that you were asked to do, because you were asked to write more of how do you call it, more of bash scripts, you now have to go and look at it. But then you see, what did I do? I opened the file, I went to edit it. How do I do that? Like all the things that I've taught right now, you are going to learn how to automate these things, because you don't always want to cd into a directory before you make edits to it, when you could easily automate that process. Okay, so that's the reason why we are learning to write bash scripts to do those ones. But then I believe that if you don't understand and you don't appreciate how to do it, how do you write a bash script? So when I see people commenting in groups that, oh, I've done everything, like I've done this, I've written the bash script, let me see your code, and I've done it, but mine is not checking. I'm like, you really don't understand what you are doing. That's why I didn't jump onto this call to say, hey, let's take tax one. Tax one, this is how you solve it. No, that's not my. Do you understand what you are doing? And are you able to do it? Once you are able to do it, now ask yourself, how do I automate this using bash scripts? So if you don't know, it's an opportunity to go and learn how do you write a bash script. Now we've done this over and over and over. But then what are you going to do? So the first thing is, maybe I need to open a directory. How do I open that directory? Let me write the code. Say cd this, or ls this. You're going to do that simple, like step by step. This is the first thing I do. This is the next thing I do, followed by this, followed by that. If it was left with writing a bash script, you don't have any problem. Because at any point in time, Stack Overflow will give you almost everything you're looking for. Okay? So an example I can give is the redirect that you saw me do. You needed to use, let's say, the set command on bash to be able to do that. So instead of going into the file directly and going to make the update, assuming that you were supposed to redirect like thousands of servers, are you now going to open each single one of the server config file, go in there and change this, go in there, change this, go in there, change that? It's not possible. So you are going to learn how to write bash script to do that same thing that you were going to do. And let's say, for example, the set command. In fact, I wasn't very familiar with it, because even though we've met it before, I didn't really pay attention to it. But this was an opportunity for me. Hey, okay, I know this is what I want to do, but then how do I do it with a set? And I just went. In fact, there were a lot of cool resources that I came across that was like detailed about set command. And I felt that, oh, really? So this is really this powerful. I can go in and edit a file without opening a file. Wow. And that is how you learn. But then you couldn't have gone ahead to appreciate that or do that if you really didn't understand how the whole thing is done. Okay? So always, I feel that going forward, it may be similar. Like almost everything that we are going to be doing, you do the configuration on your server, then you write the bash script. And probably because now we are learning configuration management, we may now switch from even using bash scripts to using Puppet to be doing the configurations, as we have been seeing along the line, being asked to do it. Now, you may not really appreciate Puppet that much, but then the end goal is, without Puppet, are you able to do that thing that now we want to configure Puppet to do? If you can do it, okay, these are the steps that I take to achieve this. And they say I can write a Puppet manifest to do that job. How do you do it? Then you take that to learn. Oh, okay, so this thing that I did, this is how Puppet, I write it for Puppet. Oh, okay. Then the next time when you are faced with an opportunity like that, you want to automate some of these things. That is how you approach it. Okay, it's very, very important. In fact, don't always think that because you are doing software engineering, that is the only role you are going to take up. A lot of us may end up some becoming cloud engineers, some DevOps engineers, software engineers, like a whole set. In fact, there are a lot of them coming out, DevRel and co. So at the end of the day, like this is like core things that you are learning, and I'm pretty happy that we are being exposed to like almost everything. So you enter any company and these things don't look strange to you. You might have learned to become a software engineer by learning programming, focusing on your programming. You go into a company, you go into a meeting where they are talking about their configuration stuff, and it's like, hey, what are you people saying? Like, yes, are you speaking Greek? But then now, even if you are not on the DevOps team and you are just an engineer and you are working with the DevOps team to maybe launch a product, when they start talking, you appreciate everything they are saying. Like, you are not lost and you can contribute meaningfully. And an engineer that has like those multi abilities, it's not easy for them to lay you off. Let's say a company is laying people off and there are two employees. One employee, let's say he is just a software engineer. That is all that he knows. The programming, that's all that he knows. And there is this other software engineer who doubles as a DevOps engineer because he knows some DevOps stuff. And we want to do some headcounts in the company. We see that, okay, we have a lot of software engineering guys. We want to lay some of them off. But then we need a lot more DevOps guys. Between the software engineer guy who just knows programming, maybe he's very good at programming, but then comparing that person to the one that can also double as a DevOps engineer, so that even if we don't have any DevOps engineer, this guy can do that job. Who do you think they are going to take? And that may be like a rare situation, but then you should get the concept. It's good you know these things. Not like you know it as in you're a master of it, but you appreciate it. So that the moment they start talking about it, you can always find your way around it. Like now, if you ask me to write a Puppet manifest for something, I don't know how to do it. Like, I'll be frank with you. But a simple Google search will help me come up with an answer. Like, let me open the documentation right now and I'll be able to generate the manifest that I need to get the work done. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, any other question? Otherwise, we are closing. Any other question? Yes, any other question? On the count of 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right. So thank you all so much for coming. I appreciate your time so much. I'm sorry we took a lot of time to get this done, but then I wanted us to get the whole understanding and get the practicality of the whole everything that we are doing. And I am hopeful that your time spent here was not wasted. At least you have either refreshed your memory or you've learned new things and you now understand some of the things that you were doing. Thank you so much. I'll see you some other time. So for those of you who are new in the group, we usually host our PLDs, which we communicate. We don't have a fixed date now, but then we communicate in the group as and when time is available for such a session. So just keep your eyes in the group. Then for those of you who do not know too, we have a Discord community. I mean, we have a server on Discord where we have interesting discussions and practical sessions to write code and practice some of the things that we learn. Usually on Fridays and Saturdays. Today is Friday, so this evening at 7 p.m. GMT. That's GMT 7 p.m. So Nigerian time or West African time would be 8 p.m. Then East African time would be that'll be 10 p.m. Okay, we'll be having what we call our tech party stocks, and we are discussing some of the things that we need to do to get ready for a job in software engineering. Okay, this is a community where you get to share your thoughts, you get to learn from others, you get to ask for advice when need be, and all those kind of things. So if you are happy to join us, just find a link to our Discord community. In fact, there is a simple link that you can use since I have always redirected everything. So the redirected link is techpaddy.com/discord. So you can find it there, techpaddy.com/discord. You'll be able to join the group. And we have 2 sets of events. So, Discord. You can use this link to /events or /live coding. Any of them will take you to our Discord community, but this is the main link. These ones are usually for the events. This is for our tech party stock and live coding for our live coding sessions, which comes on Saturdays. And tomorrow, hopefully, we'll be continuing what we started earlier. We are currently working on a currency converter application in Python. So tomorrow we'll be continuing our code during our live coding session. I think that one usually starts at 6 p.m. 6 o'clock p.m. GMT. Remember, I'm in Ghana, so I like to state the time using GMT, but you can easily add 1 hour to it if you are in West African time zone, or add 3 hours to mine if you are in the East African time zone. So yeah, this is for Saturdays. Then this is for Fridays at 7 p.m. GMT. So we also have various channels within the community where you can ask questions and get others to help you as and when needed. Then we publish resources in some of the channels as well. Yeah, so if you're happy to join us, we are also happy to accept you in the community, and we look forward to seeing you all this evening as we discuss some of the things that you need to do to get you ready for a job in software engineering. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you at another time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Mr. Roach.
Welcome.